Roundup on Radio Islam International.
Well, the United Nations annual Children in Armed Conflict report placed the Sudanese army as well as the rival Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, on the blacklist for killing and maiming of children and attacks on schools and hospitals. And whilst the attention of the world, rightfully so, on the events coming out of Palestine, the events coming out of Sudan for the last, well, over a year now has been absolutely shocking, with these two groups, the Sudanese army and the RSF, going at it with one another and the innocent civilians in the crossfire by the tens of thousands. It's estimated that by now there's over 10 million Sudanese people displaced internally as well as across the globe. And this evening we speak to Dalia Muhammad Abdul Munim, Sudanese former journalist and small baking business owner, currently a political commentator. Assalamu alaikum, Mrs. Dalia.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Dalia, it seems, unfortunately, that the world, and even us here in Africa, our attention seems very sporadic, not focused on the events coming out of Sudan, individual people and the way they are fleeing and the way they are managing their lives, while these two groups continue on their power struggle to control the country itself. But every one of those close on to 10 million people have got their own story of how they're keeping their family safe, of how they have fled either within the country or managed to make it outside the country. Dalia, you and your family, how did you manage to flee? What were the difficult circumstances that you had to leave Sudan, Khartoum in, and make your way out?
Well, the neighborhood that I lived in was at the epicenter of the crossfire. There were RSF snipers in the buildings around us. It was very difficult. It took us like a week to be able to find a way to get out. We enlisted the help of the neighborhood community groups, young men who basically could negotiate with RSF soldiers to allow civilians to leave. And that's how we did it. And we managed to secure a bus through the kindness of a Sudanese businessman who made it available for anyone who wanted to leave Khartoum, that they could find these buses and to leave. So we went to the port city on the Red Sea of Port Sudan. And from there, we managed to get out. But we went out in groups, like a group of 5 would leave, then a group of 2 people. Overall, we were more than 60 members of my family. And it took us nearly from 2 weeks to a month for all of us to be able to evacuate safely. Some of us had foreign passports, and so they're dual nationals. So other countries helped them. But for someone like me who only has a Sudanese passport, we had to rely on our own resources and our own contacts to be able to leave. And I keep saying this: we were luckier than far many others, because when I look back, we had a more smoother evacuation than a lot of other people. So in that sense, I feel very blessed, alhamdulillah, that we were able to do that. But like I say, we were lucky, very, very lucky.
Dalia, when it comes to this particular conflict between the Sudanese army and the RSF, now, many conflicts that receive or situations that receive a lot of attention, you could easily sum up what's happening in the Middle East by way of Israel and Palestine, or other issues, for example. But it seems that what's happening between these two groups, besides it being a power struggle, is absolutely vague. And we are at fault for this, for not giving it its adequate attention. But if one had to summarize, I mean, what is happening here? Why is the country in this stalemate in so many ways between these two groups? Who do they represent, and who are they supported by in the international community?
I mean, on paper, it seems a very straightforward conflict, but it's actually very complex. You have 2 armies, a state army and a militia army, fighting for power, and and each side has its own backers, has its own supporters. In regards to the militia, they have the support of countries, of some African countries, and of the UAE. It's been confirmed that the UAE supports and supplies weapons to the RSF. In regards to the Sudanese army, they have the support of Iran now. They have the support of Egypt. And they're now making moves to set up, like a relationship between themselves and Russia. When it comes to the Western world, where, they always like to, the West always likes to say we support civil rights and so on and so forth, but no support has come from them in terms of policy. Sudan has been cast to the side when it comes as a conflict, even though the spillover effects of this war do not just impact Sudan, but they also impact our neighboring countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, Central African Republic, Chad, and every single country in this part of Africa, in the Horn of Africa, has its own problems. And so, you mentioned 10 million displaced. Well, where are these 10 million displaced? The majority are displaced in Chad, because they were escaping the massacres in Darfur. There's also a significant number in Egypt. Those who escaped from Khartoum went via Egypt, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Central Africa. So, and the numbers are, I was reading a report, I think they were saying there's 1,000 people, are cross borders every day from Sudan, every day. And when you put it into context, 10 million, the population of Sudan is no more than 42 million. 10 million is nearly a quarter of the population is displaced. So the numbers are staggering. Another report said that if aid is not delivered as soon as possible, we're looking at 2 million people dying of famine, of starvation by September. 2 million. Not 2,000, 2 million. The statistics and the stats that come out of Sudan every day are just staggering and beggar belief. But where's the policy? Where is that, active, push to bring an end to this war? I see the American government actively, the shuttle diplomacy of Secretary of State Blinken traveling across the Middle East to, find a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. No such action has been taken for Sudan. All the negotiation tactics and all the negotiation meetings that have been set up have failed because the parties that have a say, the outside actors that have a say in bringing an end to this war, or at least just having a ceasefire, have no interest. And at the same time, both the warring armies have no interest in ending this war. Each one wants to be victorious over the other. And as always in all conflicts, the ones who pay the price are the people, are the civilians. And we are paying a hefty, hefty price. There are still areas in Khartoum that have not had water nor power since the start of the conflict. There have been villages razed, burnt to the ground. In the Jinena city alone in Darfur, more than 15,000 members of the Amasalit tribe were massacred in 1 month. 15,000. And that's what we know. There are so many violations taking place that they have not been able to record. Bodies of dead civilians are left to decompose on the street because they cannot be buried properly. The number of people killed because of this war is estimated to be 150,000 and above. I can go on and give you so many numbers and facts, but the end of the day this is a conflict that is just killing. It is killing us as Sudanese. The country is at a breaking point if it hasn't already been broken. The health system is in shatters. The economy there is no economy. It's just devastating. And like you said, it's just being ignored. And I truly believe it's been intentionally ignored. And there's also bias, as in, this is Africa. They've always had conflicts. They always, there's an inherent bias when it comes to viewing conflicts and which ones deserve more attention. It's been nearly more than 2 years, and Ukraine still gets headlines. The Ukraine war.
Dalia,
Sudan barely gets a mention.
Dalia, when it comes, of course, to the NGO and NPO operation, those that are, bringers of relief, the non-partisan organizations, to your knowledge, are they still being allowed to operate in all areas of Sudan, whether it's controlled by the Sudanese army or whether by the RSF. And are they being allowed to do their work under, of course, difficult conditions?
It's a twofold answer. One, no, both sides are not, like, for example, the army may say, aid can go in, but not to the RSF controlled areas. NGOs and aid agencies still require permits and, regulations to be accepted for them to be able to go through and help. And another problem that aid agencies are facing is the lack of funding. The required aid fund for Sudan is 2.2 billion. Only 12% has been covered. It's just staggering. It's just completely underserved in so many ways, whether it's from the diplomatic front or whether it's from the aid front. I mean, they even held a conference, like a donor conference in Paris on the 15th of April of this year, and something like 2.2 billion was pledged. Nothing has come forward yet. No money has been paid. And so a lot of agencies have had to shut up shop in some areas, and they also run a risk. I mean, I just read a report that an aid worker for one of the agencies was killed. At the start of the war, the WFP, the World Food Program, lost, I think, 15 staff members were killed in Darfur. So yet they continue to try and work. MSF was operating the last hospital open in Al Fashir, and they had to shut it down because they were being fired at, missiles from RSF and from the army, because Al Fashir is now a conflict zone between the two armies. So it's on the one hand, they're facing extreme difficulties in being able to do their job, and on the other hand, they're not being allowed to.
Dalia, Mohammed Abdul Mun'im, Jazakumullah khair for this conversation here and updating us on the tragic and really devastating news continuing to come out of Sudan. And indeed, you're right that this is a conflict that deserves and requires international attention immediately. It's in fact past its sell-by date when it comes to that particular discussion as well. We certainly will be keeping in touch with you, Dalia, with regards to hopefully better news coming out of Sudan for its citizens and its people. And thank you for your time, Dalia.
Thank you for having me. Inshallah khair. That's all I can say at this moment.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was Dalia Muhammad, who had joined us on the StreamYard link to discuss matters coming out of Sudan. And indeed, yes, it's one of those conflicts that are going on now. It's close on to a year and a half. You could say from a full-blown war, it's just over a year. But the rumblings of that war already started well before that. That upon the deposition of Omar al-Bashir, you could already see that this country here was teetering on some form of implosion. Well, moving on our discussion, the Minister